significantly ahead of the Chinese, but a decision was taken not to go in for nuclear weapons. Our economic model, we have Indians are an extremely creative people. They are extremely productive people. You see across the country, whether it's a farmer in Punjab, whether it's a businessman in Coimbatore, all over the country you find extremely creative and productive people. But we adopted a Soviet model in which the bureaucracy and state-owned enterprises become the norm, and people are, in a sense, their creative powers are not harassed. So I'm not going to go, this is a very, very, very long list of policies that were taken in an innocent belief that the state is perfect, the people are not. And again, I will relate this to the colonial reflex. The colonial people in India saw Indians as untrustworthy. Indians cannot be trusted. So you must have a system in which you are all powerful. The bureaucracy is all powerful. The laws are so all-encompassing that you cannot make a movement without going and getting permission from government. We have retained, unfortunately, a significant portion of that because our politicians and our officials are very happy with the system in which they have extremely high power which should belong only in a colonial state and not in a democratic state. So I'm not going to, but we have a lot of things, but Kashmir, Gwadar, UNSC and the nuclear thing and the economic thing are simply some examples of what I would define as the age of innocence. The age in which we believed in certain things which are not true. When you're an innocent person, you get cheated by somebody. You get cheated of your money, you get cheated of your freedom, you get cheated of something else by somebody. So innocence essentially means a wrong belief, in something. I would say, I don't want to use the word credulity because I'd like to maintain a certain decency in language in this lecture. But you can use a much stronger language to define innocence than I am, and to change the word to anything. But you understand what I mean. So that was the age of innocence. We believed we had a responsibility to the whole world, that we could not take the seat of China. Kashmir, UN will solve it for us. UN will get back our 1/3 land. United Nations is going to say Pakistan is the aggressor and Pakistan should vacate. And Pakistan is going to say, yes, United Nations has told me to vacate, I am going to vacate. So, nuclear bomb. If you have a nuclear bomb, it's terrible. No decent person should have, a nuclear weapon. It's something terrible. But if somebody who's not very decent has a weapon, what do? How do you fight it? That was never really discussed. So that doesn't really constitute the age of innocence. So, 1962 was a very rude shock to the age of innocence. And I think in this particular audience, and almost in any audience in this country, I need not tell you why I put 1962 as a very important year when the age of innocence completely got obliterated in the snows of the Himalayas. The assumption was made that China will never hit back, China will never oppose the forward policy, China would never do anything to upset Asian solidarity, and more importantly that if China attacks, the entire non-aligned world is going to stand with you. Now, India made a lot of powerful enemies by standing up for disadvantaged countries. I am quite proud of that. We made a sacrifice, I think a sacrifice worth making. We fought for independence of African countries, we fought for independence of Asian countries, we fought for independence in Asia and Africa, and a lot of pressure we put on the UN, etc. And those debates on colonialism, the debates on South Africa, I would urge you to please read some of those debates and read some of the Indian interventions and debates. It will make you even more proud to be an Indian than what you are now. But the reality is, we did so much for the non-aligned world, and not one country supported us when China attacked us. Maybe I think Bhutan supported us, if I'm not mistaken. We had support from Bhutan, and we are grateful to Bhutan because Bhutan did stand by us as a country. But barring Bhutan, which, as I said, stood up for principles, stood up for friendship with India, I don't think any other country, including the countries whose cause we have argued for so many years. In fact, we argued the Chinese cause for many years. We were the leading spokesman for the Chinese in several fora. In the Korean War, we took a stand which was very friendly with the Chinese who invaded Korea. Not one of these countries was on our side. So, which is why the age of innocence ended, not only with the conflict, but the post-conflict situation in which we found ourselves completely isolated in the international community. nobody on our side except one staunch friend in the Himalayas. So that is the age of innocence which ended in 1962. Now, after that, I would say is the period of confusion. After 62, it was very clear that our existing policies were faulty. It is not really very satisfactory. Our policies regarding defense, our policies regarding foreign policy, all of that was seen to be faulty. So then the question came, what are we going to do about it? What kind of a policy are we going to follow post 1962? And that is where sometimes we zig to the United States, sometimes we zag to the Russians. Now we had this concept of non-alignment. Now non-alignment is fine if everybody accepts that you can be non-aligned. But when you have a black and white world, and then you say, no, you're interested in gray, and the only choice is black or white, then you're likely to be abandoned by both sides. Both the black as well as the white are likely to abandon you or not take you seriously. So the problem was, even in the age of the Cold War, it's either one or the other, and willy-nilly, by not being on the side of the United States, we came to be seen on the side of the USSR. The US adopted policies towards us as though we were an ally of the USSR, and I'd like to say that we were not. Not one Soviet soldier ever came to India. Not one military exercise ever took place between India and the USSR. There's no way in which we were a military ally of the USSR. But we were treated by the US as though we were a military ally. So increasingly we started drifting towards the Soviet bloc. Because of the belief that we could be neutral in a world where you really cannot be neutral. So now again, as I said, okay, you go to the Soviet bloc, you go to Soviet economic policy, you go to Soviet thing. That's a policy. There's no confusion in that. But the problem was that we didn't do that. In 1966, for example, we had a policy of devaluation following the World Bank prescription on economics. In 1965-66, we had a policy in which we significantly tilted towards the United States. At that point in time, the United States, remember, was the leading provider of food grains to us. The United States was very, very active in our Green Revolution. So we had a policy of tilting towards the United States, 65, 66, and it was exemplified by even tilting towards its financial enterprises, by the World Bank advice, going in for a massive devaluation. And then what happened? By 68, we changed tack. 69, we nationalized industries. We nationalized banks. We nationalized all kinds of industries, and then back to a socialist system. So up to 1966, you're tilting to the US. Suddenly you start changing by about 1967, 68, and then you go completely back to a socialist system in 1969. Which is why I'd like to say that we had a policy of confusion. We were neither here nor there. Neither with the US nor with the Soviet Union. Neither socialistic nor capitalistic. We had a policy of not even, of a mixture. It was a zigzag. In some respects very capitalistic, in some respects very socialistic. Today socialistic, tomorrow capitalistic. So it is a policy of extreme confusion. Now why? How does this relate to foreign policy? Because the same thing applied to a foreign policy also. We had a situation, in fact, frankly, we could have been very close to Southeast Asia. We chose not to be close to Southeast Asia. We could have been very close to West Asia. At that point in time, West Asia and Southeast Asia were very close to the US. Had we been less inclined to the Soviet sphere, we would have had much stronger linkages with West Asia, much stronger linkages with Southeast Asia than we have had in the past. But we're slowly regrouping that now because of our economic strength and better diplomacy. But in those days, the tilt to the USSR, which was there, prevented us from having close relations with both these two very important segments of Asia. So why I'm telling you this is that all of this did have a major impact on foreign policy. I mean, you look at the contrast between agriculture, for example. There were people who wanted, collectivized agriculture, cooperative farming, and thank God, because of the pressure of politicians, because of the pressure of votes, that is not done. So the Green Revolution was essentially individualistic. It was based on individual farmers, individual enterprise. And it has been an immense success in many parts of the country. Whether it's in Punjab or elsewhere, it's been an immense success. So the Green Revolution was individualistic. But the industrial policy was extremely socialistic, extremely nationalization oriented, and very much geared towards the state sector. So again, confusion. Agriculture, capitalistic. Industry, socialistic. Now, it's like having two legs of different sizes. You're going to limp. You both need, you need the same pair of legs, it's the same size, roughly, otherwise you're going to limp. So this created a huge problem for us and a huge disconnect in domestic policy and in foreign policy. And I'd like to once again stress that don't remove foreign policy from domestic policy. Don't remove foreign policy from the strengths and weaknesses of a country, because a country's foreign policy, the effectiveness of a foreign policy is very closely related to the strengths and weaknesses of that country. Now, let's go back. I'm sorry that constraints of time, I'm racing through these concepts. I'm sure that, you could, follow through some of my discussions, do your own researches, come to different conclusions possibly, maybe quite different from mine, but you can work. I apologize for racing through these concepts. The next phase is 71 to 91, which I would call the era of missed opportunities. And the era of missed opportunities was inaugurated by the sequel to the war in Bangladesh. A war in which, with the help of the Indian military, the people of Bangladesh were able to be liberated from tyranny from afar. The people of Bangladesh were being subjected to very harsh tyranny, ethnic tyranny from a faraway part of the world. Far away from them, a part of the territory far away from them. And because of the armed forces of India, who combined with the people of Bangladesh, a successful outcome took place. That war was an immense military success from the Indian point of view. It could have been used to have a settlement in Kashmir. But the victory in Bangladesh had zero impact on the ground situation in Kashmir. Absolutely zero impact. The fact that more than 100,000 troops were taken prisoner, the fact the Pakistan army was comprehensively defeated, the fact that there was an immense reaction against the military even in Pakistan was not exploited at all. And the result was that was a completely missed opportunity. The victory in Bangladesh was a missed opportunity. Looking at the results of the war in Bangladesh, some of us are, sometimes we go in for this hypothesis that maybe we should have allowed Pakistan to stew in its own juice for about 3-4 years more. Maybe we should have allowed that war to continue for 3-4 years more and drain Pakistan completely. Because Pakistan was losing a lot in that war. But then of course we look at the human cost, look at the killing, look at the suffering, and then we say it may have been cold-bloodedly beneficial for India to drain Pakistan and make it bankrupt. But from the human point of view, we were probably right in going into Bangladesh and doing what we did. But it had zero impact on our Kashmir settlement. Another missed opportunity was ASEAN. ASEAN, as you know, is a grouping that was set up, and we're talking about, when I talk about ASEAN, I'd like to talk about the Middle East also. We had missed opportunities in the Middle East, because remember, at that point in time, in 1973, because of the war, Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Israel war, oil prices went up substantially, huge income increases took place in the Middle East, and from that time onwards, the Middle East started becoming enormously prosperous. Had we had strong relations with them, a lot of that money could have come to India. A lot of that investment could have come to India, and significant benefits could have come to this country. We had very minimal linkage and diplomatic strategy towards the Middle East for a simple reason that the Middle East was aligned to the United States and we were seen as aligned to the Soviet Union. For about the same reason, we declined the offer of ASEAN to have closer relations with us. In the case of the Middle East, they also could have had close relations even if we were friendly with the Soviet Union. We just never made it a priority to be friendly with them. The Middle East was never really a great priority for us at that point in time, which is a huge missed opportunity in view, as I said, of the immense increase in capital that came in the Middle East. And we are a capital short country, we were then, we are now. ASEAN also, we missed that opportunity of getting closer to ASEAN and taking advantage of trade links, etc. Now you're seeing the Northeast. You have insurgency in the Northeast. You have problems in the Northeast. There is nothing in the Northeast that economic development cannot cure. In fact, the east of India should be the most prosperous part of the country, because the east of India is linked to ASEAN, which is one of the most fast-growing areas of the world. if we have proper road, rail and other economic linkages with ASEAN through the Northeast, our East is going to develop at very, very high speed. Unfortunately, the entire question of linkage to ASEAN, forget about road and rail linkage, even normal diplomatic linkages, normal trade linkages were severely neglected at that point in time. And as a result, there was another huge missed opportunity.